Okay, I think it's time to start. It's 10 o'clock. So, warm welcome to everyone. Nice to have you here today. My name is Camilla Hytenen, and I work here in trade finance as a guarantee specialist. I'm not alone here today. I also have Olli Jääsaari here. Olli is working as a senior product manager in our trade finance and working capital management product management. First, before we start, some practical things. You will all be muted during the presentation, but if any questions arise, we have a question box there where you can write comments or questions, and we will try to have time in this presentation to also answer for your questions. The webinar will also be recorded, and we are able to share a link to this afterwards. Yeah, so as some of you have heard, in November 21, the Swift is releasing a new setup concerning Swift messages, and now we are about to present what it means in trade finance. So again, warm welcome to everyone. So the agenda for today can be seen here. First, we will go through the overview of the main changes regarding the Swift release. Then we will have a look at the changes for demand guarantees and standby letter of credits, and also accessory guarantees. And then last but not least, Olli will go through the impact on corporate customers using MT 798. So the main changes for the trade messages are here. The Swift release concerns guarantees and standby letter of credits. And basically what will be changed is that the Swift messages for demand guarantees and standby letter of credits will become more structured. There will also be a completely new Swift message type for accessory guarantees. This new Swift type is MT759. As previously, all kinds of guarantees can be or have been issued via MT 760. Now there will be a new Swift message type for accessory guarantees. There will also be new Swift message types for example, demands for payment and extender pay requests. We won't be going through them today, but just to mention that they should only affect on customers using the MT 798. So let's dive a little deeper to what the changes mean. Olli, would you please show the overview for the new Swift message structure?
Sure, thanks Camilla. The general overview of the new MT760 is that it will always include two sequences. Sequence A, containing general information about the message, and sequence B, which contains the undertaking details. So if Nordea is issuing a guarantee, this would then be Nordea's guarantee in the sequence B. Then if the text is very long, then we might have a continuation message, MT761, which will then contain the wording of our guarantee. So we have fields which are in sequence B, the narrative fields, which can be continued in the continuation message MT761. If we are to issue a counter guarantee, then our counter guarantee details will be in sequence B, and then in sequence C will be the details of the guarantee that we are asking the local bank to issue. And that text can then be continued in the MT761 as well. So the sequence C is only included in case we are requesting another bank to issue an undertaking. If we are only asking them to advise our guarantee, then it's only sequence A and B. And then if the text is super long, then we can add even more MT761 messages. So even the longer texts can be accommodated for. The guarantee amendment format will be very similar as well. So using the MT767, the amendment message, and that has its respective continuation message, MT775. So we're only looking at the issuance here, but the amendment is similar. So the basic rules apply for that as well. Now, in order to showcase what is actually changing is that this is the MT760 guarantee issuance message format today. And you don't need to read all of this text, but you need to see that it's total 7 fields, out of which the relevant information is mainly in field 77C, details of guarantee. So at the top, it has the details of instructions from the issuing bank to the advising bank. Please advise this guarantee to the beneficiary. It might have details about what to do about costs, what about fees. And then between quote and unquote, you have the actual undertaking text, which, as mentioned, could be an accessory guarantee, demand guarantee, or a standby. And any details that relate to the guarantee, like the beneficiary name, guarantee number, undertaking amount, expiry date, all of that needs to be fished out from the bulk of the text. So it's just narrative text, no automation whatsoever. Whereas then the change is that there's a lot more structured fields. What we see here is an advance payment guarantee governed by the uniform rules for demand guarantees, which is advised through another bank. So this is now showing sequence A and sequence B. If we were to add on a counter guarantee, we'd add on sequence C. And why are we showing this? It's to give you the understanding of what is actually changing, so that we can talk about what the impact is. So there are a lot more data fields. There's the applicant details, beneficiary details, and other things as well. So in order for automation, and that is one of the reasons why this change is being done, is to allow more automation. And of course, that's on the bank side. So you listening don't probably care too much as long as you get the service quickly. And that's fair. But just to understand that this will be an enabler for automation on the bank side as well. Then the narrative text, that will be split into two. So you will have the document and presentation instructions and the undertaking terms and conditions. So if we are sending a guarantee to be advised by SWIFT, then what we can do going forward from November onwards is to say that the document and presentation instructions really state that this is the address where you must present the demand. Does it have to be in paper format? Does it have to be signed? Can it come through SWIFT? Do you need any additional statements or copies of invoices or whatever? So that can all stay in the document and presentation instructions. And then in undertaking terms and conditions, this should contain the guarantee conditions which don't have another field where they could exist. So if you have a structured field, then it shouldn't be in the free text format. And then on the other hand, if you do have a structured field for something, like the applicable rules, then that information should be in that structured field and not repeated in the undertaking terms and conditions per the SWIFT rules. And then at the end, there's more structured fields. For example, governing law and underlying transaction details, which is in practice the goods description and contract reference to say what is the actual guaranteed obligation. So delivery of, let's say, Christmas decorations, as in this example. And as one example of this structured fields, I'll show this 48b demand indicator. So if this field doesn't exist in the message that is received, then multiple and partial demands are permitted. But if it contains one of these codes, for example, NMLT, which means that multiple demands are not permitted, then that's exactly the case. It might not be stated anywhere else in the message that multiple demands are not permitted and you only make one demand. Then if you are the recipient of the guarantee, the beneficiary, then these are fields that you do need to check carefully. And of course, we'll do our best to give the details on any cover letter that we send, but the actual undertaking, the demand guarantee, will contain this code only. And then hopefully you'll see that, and if you need to make a demand, to make it accordingly and know that you can only make one.
Okay, what if a customer has already agreed on a set of guarantee wording in the contract? I think it might in some cases be difficult to renegotiate. So what happens then?
That is a good question. That's very true. So what we can do is, well, if it's been decided this way and it's a demand guarantee or standby, which is to be advised through SWIFT, through another bank, then we will put the whole text, which has been agreed upon, in field 77U, the undertaking terms and conditions. This means that some information will be repeated in the mandatory structured fields, but it will also mean that you can actually then get the actual text that you have agreed upon and don't need to renegotiate it. And this is also actually what we've discussed with other banks, that is the approach that some other banks will take as well.
Thank you. So I think to sum up this change for demand guarantees and standby letters of credit, the main change is between banks. Then the new format will be visible if you are the beneficiary of a guarantee, which is to be advised to you, in which case it is recommended to check the structured fields carefully. Also, something to be considered is whether the new SWIFT format could be used as a part of the guarantee models in the contract negotiations you will have with your customers. Until today, some standby letter of credits are or have been issued either via MT700 or MT760. After the SWIFT release in November, all new standbys must be issued using the MT760 format. So, what about the accessory guarantees then?
Yes, that is one of the changes that is also happening. As you mentioned before, the MT760 can only be used for demand guarantees and standbys going forward. So if you're issuing or requesting the bank to issue an accessory undertaking or an accessory guarantee, in Swift specification they're called dependent undertakings, and this, for example, a surety under English law, then it's actually not a big change from what it is today. The difference is that it's a different message format than for other guarantees, but if you compare it to what you have today, then not a big change. It looks the same as you have today in the 759. You have a few new fields like the issuer and the function of the message, or the function of a message is of course an old field, but now it will be used for issuance of accessory undertakings. And in the narrative field, it's a big blob of text. You have the instructions at the top, you have the guarantee text between quote, unquote, and then additional information, if any, is outside of quote, unquote. And to get the beneficiary details, guaranteed number, expiry date, you actually have to go in and look at the text itself. So the same automation that is possible for the MT760 is not possible for accessory guarantees. But to be fair, most guarantees sent through Swift are payable on first demand. And additionally, all counter guarantees with a request for a local accessory guarantee issuance will be done using the MT760. So we don't see the impact to be that big, actually. It's mostly so you know that there is a difference, and especially if you're the beneficiary of some guarantees, then especially you will see the difference between the message formats. And there are some new characters that can be used, like the exclamation mark and percentage symbol. And it's the same Swift character set Z, which is also used in LC messages. And this will also be able to be used in the narrative fields of other messages as well, such as the MT760.
Thank you, Olli. Before we move to the impact on corporates using the MT7908, there is one good question regarding the governing law and or place of jurisdiction field. Can the field be left empty? And if yes, will the empty field be shown in the final Swift message sent by the bank, or will it be hidden?
That is actually a good question. I'll just drop the message format. So the governing law and place of jurisdiction, that's in the lower half of the right column, where the content is a country for the governing law. And then you have additional details where we can state that the place of jurisdiction is, for example, Copenhagen City Court. Or you can state that, for example, the country would be US. And then in the additional details, you could state New York State law. So this is an optional field. It doesn't have to be filled in. And if it's not filled in, then you will go through the usual rules if you don't state any place of or any governing law. So if you have URDG, you need to go to the URDG rulebook. And if not, it's exactly the same as issuing a demand guarantee today without a reference to a governing law. And any empty field, that will not be on the message itself. So that will be the case that the governing law and place of jurisdiction, that will not be there. Likewise, the demand indicator, if multiple and partial demands are permitted, then the field will not exist. the blank fields are also, or they are shown here in order to show that you have many new fields, but some of them will always be missing, as for example the confirmation instructions and requested confirmation party. That's not relevant for demand guarantees. It can only be used for standbys. So MT798, the Swift message type 798, proprietary message, which in this context is Swift for corporates. So what we've discussed so far is the bank-to-bank messaging standards, the 760 guarantee issuance message, the 767 amendment message, and the 759, which is going forward going to be used for the issuance and amendment of accessory guarantees. But Swift can also be used for communication between banks and corporates using the MT798 formats. And first, I'd like to focus on the flow between the applicant and an issuing bank. So if you are a corporate requesting guarantees from Nordea, and you're a Swift member using some multi-banking tool, then you can send us Swift messages requesting us to issue guarantees and standbys. So to begin, the first step is that the corporate sends the guarantee issuance request. And this contains an index message, the subtype 784 as today, and a subsequent details message, subtype 760, and possible extension messages. So it's the 784 index message and the 760 and 761, which will also be used between banks. And the main change here is that fields are moved from the index message, like the beneficiary and applicant. They're moved into the 760. And most of the fields have already existed in the corporate to bank messages. So the impact on corporates is much smaller than the changes that happen between banks. And one thing to note is that even though the bank will differentiate accessory guarantees into 759 and demand guarantees into MT760, this same combination of the subtype 784 and the details messages, it will be used to request all types of guarantees. It can be a demand guarantee, a surety, an accessory guarantee, a German Bürgschaft, or a standby. Something else as well. It doesn't matter. The request format from the corporate to the bank is always the same. And as mentioned, if the corporate requests Nordea to issue a demand guarantee or a standby, we will send out an MT760 in the same structured format. But if it is an accessory guarantee which we are to issue through another bank, to advise it through another bank, send it by Swift, then we need to send an MT759. And again, that's not ideal, as the structured fields need to be mapped into a big free text block. But that's how it will be. And again, we don't expect that many. And one thing to note that if you are requesting accessory guarantees by the Swift MT798, then you will make the bank's life much easier if you quote the whole bank guarantee text in field 77U, undertaking terms and conditions. So meaning to add the parties, amounts, and dates if you've agreed on your own text. Or you could send the text as a file act attachment. And of course, you don't need to quote the text if you're requesting our standard text. Also to note that we'll of course handle every request coming in, but the amount of manual handling that we need to do will depend on that. And once we have then issued the guarantee, we will send a notification by MT798, the subtype 762 and 760. So this will, again, always be the same format, regardless of whether we issue a demand guarantee or an accessory guarantee. And if we've sent out an MT759, then this full text will be quoted in field 77U. And as one new thing regarding this MT798 is that the request for issuance format, the MT798 subtype 784, it can also be used to request a draft from a bank. And Nordea will support this from the go live date. So if you're using MT798, you can send us draft requests if you want. However, you will need to know all the guarantee details at that point, such as amounts and expiry dates. So if you're in the contract negotiation phase, it's still easier to work through other channels. But if you are requesting a guarantee with an added wording that please send us a draft first, then that's possible to do through Swift. So if we receive such a request, we will review the text and reply with the same format as the notification of issuance, the subtype 762 and 760. And it will state that it's a draft so that you can review the text, provide comments if you want, or accept it. And at that point, we will then send the final thing to a foreign bank and then notify you that we've sent it. And the Swift for corporate, it's not only between the applicant and the issuing bank, but it's also between the advising bank and beneficiary. So Swift can be used between all these message flows. So the advice of guarantees and standbys. For demand guarantees and standbys, it's very straightforward. What will happen is the issuing bank will send the MT760 to the advising bank, in this case Nordea, and we will then forward that using MT798 and using an index message subtype 745. So this will have all the structured details, and it will be able to be automated at the corporate side as well, if you wish to do so. So that's straightforward. For dependent undertakings, the accessory guarantees, Bürgschafts, sureties, etc., which are in free text format, the issuing bank will send it to Nordea, and we will map it into our system. And after this, we will send the message to the corporate, the beneficiary, and we will send it using this 759 format. So it will be the unstructured format. This is something we discussed for a bit to see, can we actually map it into the 760 so that it would be structured and very straightforward for the receiving beneficiary to handle it in their system. But unfortunately, what this then means that It's a bit far from the idea of having an advising bank saying that this is an authentic message and here is the original message from the other bank for you. So what we've then come upon in the end is that it will be the 759 format that we get in, which we need to forward to the beneficiary, also based on guidance from Swift itself. So that's something to be aware of if you're using MT798 and receiving accessory guarantees. But again, that's probably not the usual scenario.
Okay, so that was about the usage for MT798 customers. There are some questions here now, which we have time to answer to. So first, there were only URDG mentioned in the news message, Swift message format. How can we know when there's multiple versions of the rules? How can we know which set of rules it concerns if it only reads URDG in the Swift format?
That is actually something that has been defined by Swift in their messaging standards, is that if you have a code URDG, it will be the latest version. So at this time, the 758. If the guarantee would, for some reason, be subject to URDG 458, then the code, instead of URDG, the code would be other. And there is an annex to that field which can be used, additional details, which is to be used if the code is other. So URDG, latest version, 758, and if it's other, then it's specified elsewhere in free text.
Thank you. And then just to clarify about the paper guarantees issued directly from Nordea, the physical files or guarantees, what will happen to those? Does it affect, the Swift release affect the paper guarantees at all?
Not directly. If you're requesting the guarantees through MT798, then you will need to follow the new messaging rules. But the actual guarantee that we print out and sign and send, that will be in the same format as before. And actually, likewise, if we are requesting a foreign bank to issue a guarantee on paper, it will be the counter guarantee and our request to that bank will be using the new format. But the beneficiary in, let's say, we would send the request to India, then the Indian bank would write it on paper, sign it, stamp it, and send it the guarantee to the beneficiary, who would receive a paper guarantee in the exact same way as they would today.
And also regarding the drafts sent via MT798, does the draft service only concern the Swift messages or the guarantees to be advised via Swift, or what about the drafts for the paper guarantees? Can those be requested via MT798 too?
Of course, they can be requested. And what the format between the applicant and the issuing bank, that can be used for both. Although then for paper guarantees and dependent undertakings, the accessory guarantees, there it's not 100% straightforward to see how it should be used because it is in the MT760 format. But what we've discussed is that the text should be then in field 77U, and it can be used for both paper as well as Swift guarantees, regardless of whether it's a demand guarantee or an accessory guarantee.
Thank you. And then what happens if in the future, after the Swift release, the customer receives, for example, an accessory guarantee in a MT760 format and vice versa? Are the guarantees still valid, or can they be considered as valid and they are able to make a claim under it? Does the format affect the validity of the guarantee?
And that is actually then a question for a lawyer to see whether an undertaking that has been issued is valid. So I'll not go and comment on it in fear of doing something wrong.
Okay. Yes, and also regarding the accessory guarantees, do we know why there will be a different message type for accessory guarantees?
Not completely. From discussing with Swift, they see that this is the proper way to go. Personally, I think it's trying to position the demand guarantees and standbys much closer to what the letters of credit are today, the commercial ones issued under MT700. So there, at any time you send a letter of credit, it is the MT700 format, and that's what everybody talks about. And it's very structured. It doesn't contain a lot of narrative text. I think this is the way that Swift is trying to push MT760 as well. And I think that's logical based on the meaning of automating things for the working group who decided on these formats. So I think that's the rationale behind it. I don't know the details though.
Yes, and I think some customers are already receiving the draft for acceptance prior to issuance already today, after the application has been sent by MT798. What will be the difference after the Swift release, or can you explain a bit on that?
I'm not 100% sure I caught the question correctly, but I'll try to answer, and if it was wrong, then you can ask the question again. So from what I understood is that if an applicant is sending a request to issue to a bank and saying that we need a draft before, today they would receive that draft through either a free format message in Swift, or alternatively, they would need to then receive it through, for example, email. What will change is that the draft functionality, it will have a special code field where it's not an actual request for issuance, which is being sent to the bank, but it's a request for a draft. And then the bank can reply using the same format as they would for an issued guarantee, so that the structured fields go into the correct places in the multi-banking system on both bank and corporate side. And then it's possible to request issuance of that guarantee with the push of a button and have an audit trail of Swift messages.
Yeah, and there was a clarification in example, the difference between requesting a draft or sending an application, but I hope Olli was able to answer to you.
Yes, hopefully. It's the difference is a code word in the message. It's one of the fields. I don't remember by heart what the number is, but it's in the specification.
And then what's about the MT741 and to reject corporate creation or amendment transactions? Can we comment something on that?
Now I have to say I don't remember by heart the message types, and can't really say too much on this if there's no specific message or any specific question on what would be what the asker would like to know.
Okay. Well, I think it's now time to wrap this presentation up. Before we end this, there is a small survey for feedback, and we would really appreciate if you could spend a few minutes to that. Thank you all very much for participating today, and I hope you are now aware on what the Swift release really means. Of course, if you have any questions after this, we are more than happy to help or discuss further regarding the new Swift message types. But thank you all for participating, and have a lovely summer.
Thanks from my side as well.
Bye.